People describe this shift and say, "I wish I'd found this 10 years ago. I wasted so much time without knowing this. This is the thing I was missing the whole time." But they found it eventually, and their lives split clearly and measurably into before and after. You're at a before. Right now reading this, you're at a before, and the after is one play button away, one committed listening session away, one moment of genuine openness away. 10 years from now you'll want to have found this today. Like, subscribe so you never miss what might matter most. And share this. Someone in your life is still living in their before. Chapter 1: The Shift That Rewrites Your Reality. There is a moment in every person's life when everything changes, and it doesn't look dramatic from the outside. There's no lightning strike, no standing ovation, no sudden windfall. It's quiet, almost invisible. But inside something locks into place. And from that point forward nothing feels the same. That moment is not about gaining more knowledge, more money, or more connections. It's about a shift, one mental shift that rewrites how you see yourself, your problems, and your future. Most people live their lives reacting. They react to circumstances, to other people's opinions, to setbacks, to fear. They wait for things to improve before they decide to improve. They say, "When I feel confident, I'll take action," or "When things get easier, I'll try harder." But that approach keeps them trapped in a loop where nothing truly changes. The shift is this: you stop seeing yourself as a product of your circumstances and start seeing yourself as the creator of them. At first, that idea can feel uncomfortable. It removes the excuses, it removes the blame. It puts the responsibility squarely on you, but it also gives you something far more powerful than comfort. It gives you control. Think about someone stuck in a job they hate. Every morning feels heavy. They complain about their boss, their co-workers, the long hours. They say the economy is bad, opportunities are limited, and they don't have the right connections. And maybe some of that is true, but as long as they believe their situation is controlled entirely by external forces, they remain stuck. Now imagine that same person waking up one day and deciding something different. They decide that regardless of their current situation, they are responsible for what comes next. They begin learning new skills after work. They start networking. They apply for new roles even if they feel underqualified. They take small, uncomfortable steps every single day. The job hasn't changed yet, but something inside them has, and that internal shift eventually creates an external result. This is not about ignoring reality, it's about refusing to be defined by it. In America, the culture celebrates independence, hustle, and self-made success. But those ideas only become real when they are internalized. It's easy to admire successful people from a distance. It's harder to adopt the mindset that got them there. The shift requires you to stop waiting for permission and start acting as if your future is already in your hands. Consider the athlete who trains before sunrise. No one is watching. There's no applause. There's just repetition, discipline, and the decision to show up when it would be easier not to. That athlete doesn't train based on how they feel. They train based on who they've decided to become. That's the shift in action. When you adopt this mindset, your relationship with failure changes. Failure is no longer a verdict. It becomes feedback. Instead of saying, "This didn't work, so I must not be good enough," you say, "This didn't work, so I need to adjust." That subtle difference changes everything. Take entrepreneurship as an example. Many people dream about starting a business. But they hesitate because they're afraid of losing money or looking foolish. They wait for the perfect idea, the perfect timing, the perfect plan, but those who succeed are not necessarily the smartest or the most talented. They are the ones who take action, learn from mistakes, and keep going. They don't see themselves as victims of market conditions or competition. They see themselves as problem solvers. They ask, "What can I do differently?" instead of "Why is this happening to me?" That question alone can change the trajectory of your life. If this audiobook is bringing you value so far, take a moment to like it, share it with someone who needs to hear this, leave a comment with your biggest takeaway, and subscribe to Prime Audiobooks for more content like this. Now let's continue. The shift also transforms how you handle fear. Fear doesn't disappear, it never does, but instead of letting it stop you, you use it as a signal. Fear often points directly toward growth. The things that scare you are usually the things that matter most. Imagine standing at the edge of a new opportunity. Maybe it's speaking in public, applying for a higher position, or moving to a new city. Your mind starts listing all the reasons it could go wrong. You feel the discomfort, the uncertainty. Most people step back at that moment. They retreat into safety. But with this new mindset, you step forward, not because you're fearless, but because you've decided that your growth matters more than your comfort. This is where discipline becomes your greatest ally. Motivation is unreliable. It comes and goes. Discipline is what carries you forward when motivation fades. It's the commitment to act regardless of how you feel. And here's the truth most people avoid. The life you want is on the other side of consistent, uncomfortable action. There's no shortcut around that. The shift also changes how you see time. Instead of thinking, "I'll start tomorrow," you recognize that tomorrow is just a convenient delay. You understand that every day you wait is a day you don't get back, so you start now even if it's imperfect. You write the first page, you make the first call, you take the first step, and then you take another. Over time, these small actions compound. They build momentum. They create confidence. Not the kind of confidence that comes from thinking positive thoughts, but the kind that comes from doing hard things and proving to yourself that you can handle them. This is how identity shifts. You don't wake up one day and magically become a different person. You become that person through repeated action. Every choice you make either reinforces your current identity or moves you closer to a new one. When you choose discipline over distraction, you become more disciplined. When you choose courage over comfort, you become more courageous. When you choose responsibility over excuses, you become more powerful. This is not theory. It's reality. Look at anyone who has achieved something meaningful. They didn't wait for perfect conditions. They didn't rely on luck. They made a decision, adopted a mindset, and followed it with action. And that's available to you right now, not someday, not when things get easier, not when you feel ready. Now, the shift doesn't require permission. It doesn't require a specific background or a certain level of experience. It requires a decision, a clear, unwavering decision that you are no longer going to live reactively. You are going to take ownership of your actions, your habits, your results. And once you make that decision, everything starts to change, not overnight, but inevitably. Because when you change how you think, you change how you act. And when you change how you act, you change what you create. So as you move forward from this moment, notice the patterns in your own life. Where are you waiting instead of acting? Where are you blaming instead of taking responsibility? Where are you choosing comfort over growth? And more importantly, what would happen if you made a different choice today? Chapter 2: You are not your thoughts. The shift began with ownership, with the realization that your life is not something that happens to you, but something you shape through your decisions. That idea alone starts to break the cycle of waiting and reacting. But as you begin to take responsibility, you quickly run into something deeper, something more persistent than circumstances. You run into your own mind. Most people believe their thoughts are facts. If they think something, it must be true. If they feel something, it must be valid. This is where progress quietly collapses. Because if every thought is treated as truth, then every doubt becomes a limitation. Every fear becomes a boundary, and every negative assumption becomes a self-fulfilling outcome. The next shift is this: you are not your thoughts, you are the one observing them. That distinction may seem subtle, but it is one of the most powerful realizations you can ever have. Because the moment you separate yourself from your thoughts, you gain the ability to question them, challenge them, and ultimately change them. Imagine sitting in a room with a loud radio playing in the background. The noise is constant. Sometimes it's helpful, sometimes it's distracting, and sometimes it's completely wrong. Most people live as if they are the radio. Every message that comes through feels personal and absolute. But the truth is, you are the listener. You can turn the volume down, you can change the station, you can even choose to ignore it altogether. Your mind produces thoughts automatically. It pulls from past experiences, fears, insecurities, and conditioning. It tries to protect you, often by keeping you within familiar territory. But what keeps you safe can also keep you stuck. Think about the person who wants to start something new but immediately hears the voice in their head saying, "You're not ready," or "You're going to fail." That voice feels convincing because it's familiar. It's been there for years, but it's not a prediction, it's a pattern, and patterns can be broken. When you stop identifying with every thought, you create space. In that space, you can ask better questions. Instead of accepting "I'm not good enough," you ask, "Is that actually true?" Instead of believing "this will never work," you ask, "What if it could?" These questions don't magically solve everything, but they interrupt the automatic loop. They give you a moment of control. In high-pressure environments like competitive careers or fast-paced industries, this ability becomes a massive advantage. While others are overwhelmed by stress and self-doubt, those who understand this shift can stay focused. They recognize that just because a thought appears doesn't mean it deserves attention. Consider a professional walking into a big presentation. Their mind starts racing. What if I mess up? What if they don't like it? What if I forget everything? Those thoughts are normal. Everyone experiences them. The difference is how they are handled. One person gets consumed by them, loses confidence, and underperforms. Another person notices the thoughts, acknowledges them, and proceeds anyway. The thoughts didn't disappear, but they also didn't take control. That's the difference between being controlled by your mind and leading it. If this audiobook is bringing you value so far, take a moment to like it. Share it with someone who needs to hear this. Leave a comment with your biggest takeaway. And subscribe to Prime Audiobooks for more content like this. Now let's continue. This shift also changes how you deal with negativity. Negative thoughts are not the enemy. Trying to eliminate them completely is unrealistic. The goal is not silence. The goal is awareness and direction. Think of your mind as a tool. If you don't consciously use it, it will default to old habits. It will replay past failures, exaggerate risks, and focus on worst-case scenarios. But when you take control, you can direct it towards solutions, possibilities, and action. This doesn't mean forcing fake positivity. It means choosing constructive thinking over destructive thinking. For example, instead of thinking, "I always mess things up," you shift to "What can I do better next time?" Instead of "This is too hard," you shift to "This is challenging, but I can figure it out." These are not empty affirmations. They are intentional reframes that move you forward instead of holding you back. Over time, this practice rewires how you think, not because you're suppressing negativity, but because you're consistently choosing a more useful perspective. This is especially important in moments of failure. When something goes wrong, your mind will try to create a story. It will look for meaning, often in the form of self-criticism. "This proves I'm not capable. This always happens to me. I should just give up." But those stories are optional. You can choose a different one. You can decide that failure is part of the process. You can see it as data instead of defeat. You can use it to adjust your approach rather than abandon your goal. This is how resilience is built, not by avoiding difficulty, but by changing how you interpret it. The shift also impacts your emotional state. Emotions often follow thoughts. If your thoughts are consistently negative, your emotions will reflect that. But when you learn to guide your thinking, you influence how you feel. You don't wait to feel confident before taking action. You take action and confidence follows. You don't wait to feel motivated. You act and motivation builds. This reverses the common pattern where people wait for the perfect internal state before doing anything meaningful. That state rarely comes on its own. It's created through movement. And this brings you back to responsibility, but on a deeper level. Not just responsibility for your actions, but responsibility for your internal world, your thoughts, your focus, your attention. Where you place your attention shapes your experience. If you constantly focus on what's wrong, what's missing, what could go wrong, your world will feel limited and heavy. If you focus on what you can control, what you can improve, and what's possible, your world opens up. The external environment may not change immediately, but your experience of it does, and that changes how you show up. This is not about ignoring reality, it's about choosing how you engage with it. As you continue forward, pay attention to your thoughts, not to judge them, not to fight them, but to understand them. Notice the patterns, notice the automatic responses. And then ask yourself, are these thoughts helping me or holding me back? And if they're holding you back, what would it look like to choose a different one? Chapter 3: Action Creates Identity. You've already seen how everything begins to change the moment you take ownership of your life. You've also recognized that your thoughts are not commands but signals, something you can observe and redirect. But there is a gap where most people get stuck. They understand the ideas, they feel inspired for a moment, and then nothing changes. Because understanding alone does not transform you. Action does. The next shift is simple, but it demands everything. You don't wait to become someone new before you act. You act. And that action creates the person you become. Most people have it backwards. They believe they need confidence before they start. They think they need clarity before they move. They wait until they feel ready. But readiness is not a prerequisite, it's a result. Think about the first time someone steps into a gym after years of inactivity. They don't feel strong, they don't feel confident, they feel out of place. Every instinct tells them they don't belong there. If they listened to those feelings, they would walk right back out. But if they stay, if they complete that first workout, something shifts, not dramatically, not instantly, but undeniably. They have evidence now, proof that they showed up. The next time becomes slightly easier. And over time, that repeated action builds a new identity. They don't start as a fit person. They become one by acting like one. This applies to every area of life. The writer who writes consistently becomes a writer. The entrepreneur who takes risks and solves problems becomes a business owner. The person who speaks up despite fear becomes confident. Identity is not something you find, it's something you build. In American culture, there's a strong emphasis on self-made success. But what often gets overlooked is the process behind it. It's not about one big moment. It's about thousands of small decisions made consistently over time. Decisions that often feel insignificant in the moment, but compound into something powerful. Consider someone who wants to change their financial situation. They might read books, watch videos, and plan endlessly, but until they take action, nothing shifts. The moment they start tracking their spending, learning new skills, or creating additional income streams, they begin to move. The results may be small at first, almost invisible, but those actions are laying the foundation for a different future. This is where discipline becomes more important than motivation. Motivation will get you started, but discipline keeps you going when the excitement fades. And it will fade. That's part of the process. There will be days when you don't feel like showing up. Days when the progress feels slow. Days when doubt creeps back in. Those are the moments that define you, because every time you act despite resistance, you reinforce a new identity. You prove to yourself that you are someone who follows through. If this audiobook is bringing you value so far, take a moment to like it. Share it with someone who needs to hear this. Leave a comment with your biggest takeaway. And subscribe to Prime Audiobooks for more content like this. Now let's continue. One of the biggest barriers to action is the need for perfection. People want the perfect plan, the perfect timing, the perfect conditions, but perfection is a trap. It creates delay. It gives you a reason to wait. Action, on the other hand, creates clarity. When you start, you learn. You see what works and what doesn't. You adjust. You improve. Think about someone launching a new idea. If they spend months trying to make everything perfect before starting, they lose time and momentum. But if they start with what they have, they gain real-world feedback. They can refine their approach based on actual experience, not just assumptions. This is how progress happens, not in theory, but in practice. Another important part of this shift is consistency. Not intensity, not occasional bursts of effort, but steady, repeated action. It's easy to go all in for a short period of time. It's harder to show up every day, especially when the results are not immediate. But consistency is what creates lasting change. Imagine two people trying to improve their skills. One works intensely for a week and then stops. The other works steadily for months. The second person will always win, not because they are more talented, but because they stayed in the game. This is where patience becomes essential. In a world that values instant results, it's easy to feel like you're falling behind. You see others succeeding and you wonder why your progress feels slow. But what you don't see is the time and effort behind those results. You don't see the early mornings, the late nights, the failures, the adjustments. You see the outcome, not the process. When you focus on your own actions instead of comparing yourself to others, you stay grounded. You measure progress by your effort, not just your results. And over time, those efforts add up. This shift also changes how you handle setbacks. When something goes wrong, it's easy to question everything, to think that maybe you're not cut out for this. But setbacks are part of the process. They are not interruptions, they are information. Each setback shows you something you didn't know before. It gives you data. And when you use that data, you improve. The key is to keep moving. Even small actions matter. Sending one email, making one call, practicing one skill. These actions may seem insignificant, but they build momentum. And momentum is powerful. Once you have momentum, everything feels different. The resistance decreases. The process becomes smoother. What once felt difficult starts to feel normal. And that's when you realize something important. You're no longer trying to become someone else. You've already started becoming that person. This is the power of action. It doesn't require you to feel ready. It doesn't require you to have everything figured out. It requires you to start right where you are, with what you have, and as you continue, your identity evolves. Your confidence grows, your perspective shifts, not because you waited for change, but because you created it. So as you move forward, look at your daily choices, not your intentions, not your plans, but your actions. What are they building? What identity are they reinforcing? And if you were to act today as the person you want to become, what would you do differently? Chapter 4: Discomfort is the direction. You've already stepped into a different way of living. You've taken ownership instead of waiting, separated yourself from limiting thoughts instead of obeying them, and started building your identity through action instead of intention. But as you move forward, something becomes clear very quickly. Growth is not comfortable. In fact, the very feeling most people avoid is the exact signal they should be following. The next shift is this: discomfort is not something to escape. It is something to move toward. From a young age, most people are conditioned to seek comfort. You're taught to avoid failure, to stay within your limits, to choose the safer path. And while comfort has its place, it becomes a problem when it turns into a habit. Because a life built around comfort is a life that stops expanding. Every meaningful level up in your life will require you to step into something unfamiliar, a new environment, a new challenge, a new version of yourself. And every time you approach that edge, discomfort shows up. Your heart rate increases. Your mind starts questioning your decision. You feel resistance. That feeling is often misinterpreted as a warning sign, something telling you to stop. But in reality, it's often a sign that you're exactly where you need to be. Think about someone walking into a room full of people they don't know. Maybe it's a networking event, a conference, or a new workplace. The instinct is to stay quiet, to blend in, to avoid attention. That's the comfort zone trying to protect them. But the opportunities in that room don't come from hiding. They come from engaging, from introducing yourself, from starting conversations that feel awkward at first. The discomfort is not the problem. Avoiding it is. In the US, where opportunity often favors those who take initiative, this shift becomes even more important. The people who rise are not necessarily the ones with the least fear. They are the ones who act despite it. They walk into rooms where they feel out of place. They raise their hand when they're unsure. They take chances that others avoid. They understand something most people don't. Comfort keeps you where you are. Discomfort moves you forward. If you look at any area where you want improvement, you'll find discomfort waiting there. Want to get in better shape? It's going to require physical effort, fatigue, and discipline. Want to grow your career? It will demand learning new skills, taking on more responsibility, and risking rejection. Want to build confidence? You'll have to face situations where you feel uncertain and exposed. There is no path to growth that avoids discomfort. But here's where the shift changes everything. Instead of asking, how do I avoid this feeling, you start asking, what is this feeling trying to show me? A discomfort becomes a compass. It points toward the areas where you have the most potential for growth. The things you avoid are often the things that matter most. The conversations you delay, the risks you hesitate to take, the challenges you keep pushing off. Those are not random, they are signals. And when you start following those signals, your life begins to expand in ways that comfort alone could never create. If this audiobook is bringing you value so far, take a moment to like it. Share it with someone who needs to hear this. Leave a comment with your biggest takeaway, and subscribe to Prime Audiobooks for more content like this. Now let's continue. One of the biggest mistakes people make is waiting for discomfort to go away before they act. They think that if they wait long enough, they'll feel ready, but that feeling rarely comes. The discomfort doesn't disappear through waiting. It decreases through exposure. The more you face something, the less intimidating it becomes. The first time you do something new, it feels overwhelming. The second time, it's still uncomfortable but slightly more manageable. By the 10th time, it starts to feel normal, not because the situation changed, but because you did. This is how confidence is built, not by avoiding what's hard, but by repeatedly stepping into it until it becomes familiar. Think about someone learning to speak in public. The first attempt is filled with nerves, self-doubt, and fear of judgment. But with each attempt, something shifts. They learn how to manage their nerves. They become more comfortable with the environment. They start focusing less on themselves and more on delivering value. Eventually, what once felt terrifying becomes part of who they are. That transformation doesn't happen by staying comfortable. It happens by leaning into discomfort again and again. This shift also changes how you interpret stress. Not all stress is negative. There is a type of stress that pushes you to grow, to adapt, to become stronger. When you start viewing certain challenges as opportunities instead of threats, your response changes. Instead of shutting down, you engage. Instead of retreating, you step forward. This doesn't mean you ignore your limits or burn yourself out. It means you become intentional about where you place yourself. You choose challenges that stretch you, not break you. You build resilience over time. And resilience is what allows you to keep going when things don't go as planned, because they won't. There will be moments when the discomfort feels overwhelming, moments when you question your path, moments when it would be easier to go back to what's familiar. Those are the moments where this shift matters most. You remind yourself that discomfort is temporary but growth is lasting. You remind yourself that every time you choose the harder path, you are building something stronger within you. And over time, your relationship with discomfort changes. It no longer feels like an enemy. It starts to feel like a signal of progress. You begin to recognize it in different areas of your life. When you feel resistance before starting something important, you don't run from it, you lean in. When you feel nervous about an opportunity, you don't dismiss it, you explore it. You become someone who moves toward challenges instead of away from them. This is where real transformation happens, because when you consistently choose growth over comfort, your standards change. What used to feel difficult becomes your baseline. What used to feel impossible starts to feel achievable. And that opens the door to new levels of performance, new opportunities, and a new version of yourself. So as you continue forward, pay attention to what you're avoiding. Notice the patterns. Notice where comfort is keeping you in place. And then ask yourself what would happen if you stepped directly into that discomfort today. Chapter 5, Focus, DECIDES, Your Future. You've taken ownership of your life instead of waiting on circumstances. You've learned to separate yourself from the constant noise of your thoughts and started building your identity through action. You've also stepped into discomfort instead of avoiding it, recognizing it as the path to growth. But even with all of that in motion, there is one force that quietly determines the speed and direction of your progress. That force is focus. The next shift is this: what you focus on expands, and what you ignore fades. Every day you are directing your attention somewhere. Most people don't realize how much control they have over this. They let distractions, notifications, other people's opinions, and random events dictate where their focus goes. And over time, that scattered attention leads to scattered results. Focus is not just about productivity, it's about direction. It's about deciding what matters and giving it your energy consistently. Think about the average day. The phone lights up with notifications. Social media pulls your attention in multiple directions. News cycles constantly highlight problems, conflicts, and negativity. Without realizing it, your mind becomes trained to jump from one thing to another, never fully settling, never going deep. Now compare that to someone who intentionally controls their focus. They set clear priorities. They limit distractions. They dedicate time to meaningful work without interruption. Over time, the difference between these two approaches becomes massive. One person stays busy but stagnant. The other makes measurable progress. This is because focus amplifies effort. When your attention is divided, your results are diluted. But when your attention is concentrated, your actions become more effective. You move faster, you learn deeper, you create better outcomes. In a culture that often celebrates multitasking, this shift can feel counterintuitive. But the truth is, multitasking is often just rapid switching between tasks, and that switching comes at a cost. It drains your energy and reduces the quality of your work. Deep focus, on the other hand, builds mastery. Consider someone trying to develop a new skill. If they practice while constantly checking their phone, responding to messages, and getting distracted, their progress will be slow. But if they create an environment where they can fully concentrate, even for a shorter period of time, their improvement accelerates. This applies to your career, your health, your relationships, and every other area of your life. Where your focus goes, your results follow. But focus is not just about external distractions. It's also about internal ones. The thoughts you choose to engage with, the stories you repeat in your mind, the problems you dwell on. If you constantly focus on what's wrong, what's missing, or what could go wrong, your mind becomes trained to look for more of the same. You start seeing obstacles everywhere. Your energy drops. Your actions become hesitant. But when you shift your focus to what you can control, what you can improve, and what's possible, your mindset changes. You become more proactive, more solution-oriented, more resilient. This doesn't mean ignoring challenges. It means choosing a focus that moves you forward instead of holding you back. If this audiobook is bringing you value so far, take a moment to like it. Share it with someone who needs to hear this. Leave a comment with your biggest takeaway. And subscribe to Prime Audiobooks for more content like this. Now let's continue. One of the most powerful ways to apply this shift is by setting clear intentions for your day. Instead of waking up and reacting to whatever comes your way, you decide in advance what matters most. You identify the tasks, habits, or actions that align with your goals and you give them your full attention. This doesn't require a complicated system. It requires clarity and commitment. You choose a few priorities, and you protect your time and energy around them. This is especially important in a world where attention is constantly being pulled in different directions. Companies spend billions of dollars trying to capture your focus. Social platforms are designed to keep you engaged for as long as possible. If you don't take control of your attention, something else will. And when that happens, your time slips away without meaningful progress. Another important aspect of focus is elimination. Not everything deserves your attention. Not every opportunity is worth pursuing. Not every distraction needs a response. Part of becoming more focused is learning to say no. No to things that don't align with your goals. No to activities that drain your energy without adding value. No to distractions that pull you away from what truly matters. This can be uncomfortable, especially if you're used to saying yes to everything. But every time you say yes to something unimportant, you're saying no to something that could move your life forward. A focus requires discipline, not just in what you do, but in what you choose to ignore. This shift also changes how you measure progress. Instead of constantly looking for big results, you pay attention to your consistency. You measure how well you're maintaining your focus on the right things. Because over time, consistent focus leads to exponential results. Think about someone investing their time and energy into a single goal for months or years. While others are jumping from one thing to another, they stay committed. They refine their approach, they improve their skills, and eventually their results start to stand out, not because they had more talent, but because they had more focus. This is where patience and trust come into play. The results of focused effort are not always immediate. There may be periods where it feels like nothing is happening. But beneath the surface, progress is building, skills are developing, habits are strengthening. Momentum is growing, and then at some point the results become visible. This is why it's important to stay locked in on your process instead of getting distracted by short-term outcomes. When you trust your focus, you stay consistent even when the results are not yet obvious. Over time, this creates a powerful advantage. While others lose direction, you stay aligned. While others get distracted, you stay committed. And that consistency compounds into something significant. So as you move forward, pay attention to where your focus is going. Notice what's capturing your attention throughout the day. Notice what you're feeding your mind, and then ask yourself, is this helping me move forward or is it pulling me off track? Because at the end of the day, your future is not determined by what you intend to do. It's determined by what you consistently focus on. And if you were to take full control of your focus starting today, what would you choose to give your attention to? Chapter 6, The Standard You Refuse to Lower. You've taken ownership of your life instead of waiting for change. You've learned to step back from your thoughts, act your way into a stronger identity, move toward discomfort, and direct your focus with intention. Each shift has built on the last, turning you from someone who reacts into someone who leads. Now everything comes down to one final truth. The one that determines whether these shifts become temporary motivation or a permanent transformation. The final shift is this: your life will rise or fall to the standards you refuse to compromise. Standards are different from goals. Goals are things you want to achieve. Standards are the rules you live by. Goals can be postponed. Standards cannot. Goals are occasional targets. Standards are daily decisions. Most people set goals, but very few set non-negotiable standards. That's why progress often starts strong and then fades. When things get difficult, when discomfort increases, when results are slow, they adjust their effort instead of holding the line. But when you operate from standards, your behavior doesn't depend on how you feel. It depends on who you've decided to be. Think about someone who says they want to get in shape. That's a goal. But if their standard is flexible, they'll work out when it's convenient, eat well when they feel like it, and skip when it's uncomfortable. The result is inconsistency. Now think about someone whose standard is clear. They don't miss workouts. They don't negotiate with excuses. They've decided that this is simply what they do. Their actions are no longer optional. They are expected. That's the difference. Standards remove decision fatigue. They eliminate the internal debate. They turn effort into identity. In the United States, where performance and results are constantly measured, the people who stand out are often the ones with the highest standards. Not just in public, but in private. Not just when it's easy, but especially when it's hard. They show up when no one is watching. They follow through when it would be easier to quit. They hold themselves accountable even when there are no immediate consequences, because their standard is not based on external pressure. It's internal, and this is where everything connects. Ownership gives you responsibility. Awareness gives you control over your thoughts. Action builds your identity. Discomfort pushes your growth. Focus directs your energy. But standards are what hold all of it together. Without standards, these shifts fade over time. With standards, they become permanent. If this audiobook is bringing you value so far, take a moment to like it. Share it with someone who needs to hear this. Leave a comment with your biggest takeaway. And subscribe to Prime Audiobooks for more content like this. Now let's continue. The challenge with standards is that they require honesty. You can't pretend. You can't hide behind intentions. Your standards are revealed by your actions, not your words. If you say you value discipline but you consistently choose distraction, your standard is distraction. If you say you value growth but you avoid discomfort, your standard is comfort. If you say you want more but you settle for less, your standard is settling. This is not about judgment, it's about clarity. Because once you see your current standards clearly, you can change them. Raising your standards doesn't require a dramatic announcement. It requires a decision. A quiet, firm decision that certain behaviors are no longer acceptable. You stop tolerating what holds you back. You stop making exceptions for habits that don't serve you. You stop negotiating with the version of you that wants to stay comfortable. And in place of that, you create new rules. You decide that you follow through on what you start. You decide that you do the work even when you don't feel like it. You decide that you move toward challenges instead of away from them. At first, this can feel intense. It can feel like pressure, but over time it becomes normal. It becomes who you are. And once that happens, everything changes. Because when your standards are high, your environment starts to shift. The people you spend time with, the opportunities you attract, the way others perceive you, all of it begins to align with the level you operate at. You no longer chase results. You create them through consistent behavior. This also changes how you handle setbacks. When something goes wrong, you don't lower your standards to match the difficulty. You rise to meet it. You adjust your strategy, not your commitment. You stay locked in on your process even when the outcome is uncertain. This is what creates long-term success, not bursts of effort, but sustained discipline guided by clear standards. And here's the truth most people avoid. Raising your standards will cost you something. It will cost you comfort. It will cost you convenience. It may even cost you certain relationships or familiar patterns that no longer fit who you're becoming. But what it gives you in return is far greater. It gives you control over your life. It gives you confidence that comes from knowing you can rely on yourself. It gives you a sense of direction that doesn't depend on external circumstances. And most importantly, it gives you alignment. The feeling that your actions match your intentions. That alignment is powerful because when you trust yourself, you move differently. You take bigger risks. You pursue bigger goals. You stop hesitating and start executing. You become someone who doesn't just talk about change but lives it. And that is where the real transformation happens, not in a single moment, not in a burst of motivation, but in the quiet consistency of holding yourself to a higher standard every day. As this journey comes to a close, everything you've heard comes back to one point. The shift was never about changing your circumstances overnight. It was about changing how you show up within them. Because when you change that, everything else follows. Your thoughts become more intentional. Your actions become more consistent. Your tolerance for comfort decreases. Your focus sharpens. Your standards rise, and your life reflects it. So now, as you move forward from this moment, the question is no longer whether change is possible. You've already seen that it is. The question is what you will do with it. What standards will you set for yourself starting today? What behaviors will you no longer tolerate? What version of yourself are you ready to commit to, not occasionally but consistently? And when things get difficult, when the discomfort returns, when your mind starts to resist, will you fall back into old patterns, or will you hold the line and step forward anyway? Because at the end of the day, your future is not decided by what you want. It's decided by what you refuse to accept. And once you decide that, everything changes.